Welcome back. So we'll continue from where we had left off last time. And the whole Kaurava tree, the genealogy tree, is pretty complicated. So we will keep referring to this so it is somewhat fresh in our minds what we are talking about. These characters, one needs to understand them in order to appreciate how they are being represented in the Bhagwad Gita and in Mahabharat and what role they are playing. So let's go over some of this. And I have, I'm going to try and use some annotation here. So we saw that Satyavati and Parashar, Parashar was the rishi that had got this power. He was one of those sages who had reached those heights where he had this paranormal power. So he was able to impregnate Satyavati and without having any physical contact. And then Vyasa was born. So we saw that. And then we saw that Shantanu and Ganga gave birth to Bhishma. So we saw that Bhishma, whose name was Devavrat, and he took this oath, which forms one of the core reasons why the whole Mahabharat took place. And then we saw that there were Shantanu and Satyavati had two kids, Chitrangad and Vichitravirya. Now Vichitravirya with Ambika, they gave birth to Dhritarashtra. I am saying this, but if you remember the story, it is actually not Vichitravirya, but Satyavati had to ask Vyasa to impregnate Ambika the same way that, well, using a similar technology, if you will. And so through Vyasa, there was Dhritarashtra, who is the blind king, who was born to Ambika. And then through Ambalika, there was born Pandu. And the third kid that was born was, this is a very important character which we touched upon last time, which was Vidura. And Vidura was basically born out of this maid that used to be there around that time. Interestingly, this whole background we are doing because we are interested in the Bhagwad Gita, and Bhagwad Gita forms one of the portions of this huge Mahabharat. Mahabharat is divided into sections, and they are called Parva. There is Aranyaka Parva and Bhishma Parva, and the Bhagavad Gita happens to fall in something called as the Bhishma Parva. And obviously Bhagavad Gita is studied a lot, and it has got a lot of inner meaning. Now, similar to that, actually, Vidura has something called as Vidura Niti, and that too is studied a lot. Maybe it's not as popular as the Bhagavad Gita, but it is also quite popular, and it is also, it discusses deep philosophical and some of the lofty, uplifting thoughts that are there in the Vedanta. You will find discussed in the Vidura Niti. Maybe later on we might touch upon a little of that. Now Pandu is having two wives through Kunti, and we touched upon a little bit of that. Through Kunti, he has three kids, basically Arjun, Bhima, and Yudhishthira. We are going to go over some of this. And if you remember last time, we had said that Kunti was testing out the boon that she had received, and that ended up being Karna. So Karna was born, and she let him go into the river, and we saw a little bit of that story. And then this we have not seen, which is Pandu had another wife called Madhuri. Let me see what different color I could use here. So he married Madhuri, and through her, he had these twins, Nakula and Sahadev. So they kind of make up the 5 Pandavas. I know it sounds complicated, but as we go through the story and the names of these characters begin to emerge in that story, you will find that you can map these appropriately and not find it that confusing after a while. You also might remember I had said that right at the bottom of this genealogy tree is where you can see Janmejaya, and this is not important, it's just a side note as an interesting fact that the recording, if you will, of the Mahabharat, how it was documented, is really Janmejaya is doing this snake sacrifice. That's another long story, but he's doing a snake sacrifice, and there are moments of lull during this whole activity. So there's a moment of inactivity during this sacrifice. That is when this story was being told actually, and it's being captured. There is a Vyasa is the author of Mahabharat, but his disciple, his name is Vaishampayan. He is really reciting this to somebody, and somebody else hears this, and it's being told to Shaunaka Rishi and lots of guys. We obviously don't need to know the details, but just it's an interesting fact that it starts out here. Okay, let me clear this up. And in this chart that you see, there are a few characters that are not there, which is what we are going to see next. We are going to see a few of those, and then we'll get into more of these Mahabharat characters. And then we'll see the interactions between them. And with this, we'll go on for a while. And we'll try and build up this story till it gets to the point where Bhagavad Gita starts. And at that point, we are going to reflect back on what all this means and what is really being said behind this and what are the names. And I have been saying time and again that don't take this at face value. There is this is poetry. There's lots of metaphors, and so we need to be able to get inside the characters, behind the characters, and see really what is being said. And so we are kind of going to see these two interpretations of the Mahabharata. One which is more commonly there, and then the other where we find the hidden meaning behind this. So let me clear this up, and let us go to the next topic that I want to take, and that is Dranacharya and Ashwatthama. Now, these two you did not find in that genealogy tree because they don't belong to that tree. That's why they are not there. But they are very important characters in the Mahabharata. So Dranacharya was the guru. Guru is the teacher who was teaching both the Pandavas and Kauravas, and he imparted both these princes all the requisite skills that they got in when they do end up in a battle. But at this point, if they were to get into a battle, the kind of skills that they would need, and there are lots of interesting stories about what happened during this teaching, the Gurukula, if you will, when the students go to the Guru's place. Now, I may have mentioned this earlier, but I definitely have said that in Sanskrit, there is a lot of concatenation of words that give rise to new words. Some of them very obvious, some of them can get a little complicated. And then when they form part of a even bigger sentence, then you after a while, it almost begins that to become kind of a skill to be able to decipher that this sentence is made up of these 7 words, the way they, especially when they join, the part where 2 words join, they kind of pronounce it in a different way. So Dronacharya is actually made up of 2 words. There's Drona and then there's Acharya. Acharya means teacher. So it's like saying, Professor Smith. If you are saying that, you would say Smith Acharya, something like that. So Dranacharya is this guru, the royal guru, and he himself is very powerful in the science of warfare, and he knows a lot about the arms and ammunition at those times, how to wield them, and the uh, different kinds of mantras. So there's two kinds of ammunition, if you will. There is shastra and astra. So one where you just use it as is, and the other is where you kind of use some kind of you chant kind of a spell on it, and it becomes even more powerful. And so he knows all this, and he's imparting all this knowledge. And there are stories around how he is so good at what he does. And he has got this son, Ashwathama. And Ashwathama he is a very interesting character. He's the guru's son, but he has got some element of dissatisfaction. He's disturbed a lot of times. We don't want to get exactly into his character and why he was the way he was. But there is one very important thing about him, maybe two, that is the reason why we bring him up here. And that is, he was immortal. There are like 6 or 7 characters in the Hindu systems of knowledge which are immortal. He is one of them. And we'll understand why he has this trait of immortality at some point. And the second part is the amount of love and affection that Dronacharya has towards this son is immeasurable. The love that he has, this attachment that he has, plays a key role in this story of Mahabharat. So we need to keep this at the back of our mind, that they had this bond of attraction. And actually, this fact, this attraction that they have, it kind of plays an important role after Bhagwad Gita. But we might see this just in order to understand why it is important. We may touch upon, depending on how we develop the story, we may touch upon that. So they are not part of the whole Kaurava and Pandava clan, but they are important characters. Now we are going to see a few other characters that don't exactly come here. They are mentioned, but they are kind of important. So the next character that is there is, you already know that Dhritarashtra was blind. So he happened to marry this princess from Gandhar, and that's why her name is called Gandhari. Now when she happens to marry the king Dhritarashtra, and she knows before and he is blind, so she, a very devoted wife, she said, if my husband is blind, then I too is going to live like him. And she puts this she puts this band over her eyes, and her whole life she lives like that. And it kind of gives her a certain level of power, because it's almost a penance that she has done. She has in ancient Hindu works, there's something called as tapas. So you perform it, you perform penance, you take on some physical activities that are very, very tough, and it's you don't do it because you want powers, but you do get powers when you do that. I have actually seen a few people in my lifetime that have done, like I have seen one person in India where he had taken this oath that he would put his hand up and not take it down. And he, I guess he may have been in his teens when he took this. And when I saw him, he was in his 40s, maybe mid 40s, and his hand was all shriveled down, and it was really small. I think the blood supply never reached it. But there are people who do that, and I suppose he had mentally, at least, he had some kind of strength. It's obviously it's not easy. What kind of determination you would need to be able to do that? So anyhow, she did that. She put this band over her eyes and she led her whole life blind. There was just one instance where she did take this off, and we may or may not touch upon it because it comes after the Bhagwad Gita. Now, there is this brother of hers, and his name is Shakuni, and he is a key player also in the Mahabharat. And you can see that he's holding a pair of dice in his hand, so he's kind of good at it. And he is supposed to have control over this game. He would be able to summon what numbers the dice would show up when he throws it in the game. And he is extremely upset that his sister has to lead this kind of life. And in his mind somewhere, he holds this vengeance against this kingdom, that this kingdom who has made my sister lead this kind of a life, I will do whatever it takes to destroy it. And he practically gets that wish of his done, and he never loses an opportunity to manifest this vengeance of his. Every time that he gets a chance, he will capitalize on it. And the other characters, surprisingly, they kind of help him towards getting to his goal here. So Shakuni and Gandhari, they come from the same place, Gandhar. So she is Gandhari, and they are part of the Kaurava clan, and Gandhari's sons, the 100 Kauravas, they have a very close relationship with their uncle. He's their uncle because he's her brother. So they have a very close relationship, and he is able to dictate things because of this closeness that he has. Now, the Pandavas, the 5 Pandavas that are there, the 5 Pandavas, they are Kunti's and Madari's sons. So Kunti, because of the boon that she has been able to get kids from these deities. So from in heaven, there are a lot of gods, and there is a god who is kind of ruling heaven. So he is the god of gods, if you think. So his name, this god of gods name is Indra. And this Indra, Kunti has approached Indra, and the son that she begets from Indra is Arjun. So all this has got an important meaning, why these sons have these names and which deities they come from. So although Arjuna is not the eldest, so the eldest one, his name is Yudhishthir. Now Yudhishthir is the son that Kunti gets from there is a slight bit of controversy here, that there is someone called as Dharmaraj. Dharma is The dharma is a very loaded word actually, and depending on who you ask and what point of the story you ask, you are going to get a lot of different meanings. There's a lot of argument and debate that can go over it, and we are staying at a very simplistic level, so don't get overboard with this. But at this point, dharma is the principle of righteousness, if you will. And so all these principles that are there that make you a righteous person, so that the person who is able to own this, live this kind of life, is Dharmaraj. And Dharmaraj is she Kunti approaches Dharmaraj, and the son that she gets from Dharmaraj, his name is Yudhishthira. So Dharmaraj is also the god of death, and his name is Yama. Now, like I said, there's a little bit of controversy behind this. We shouldn't be swayed away because there is this controversy. There's the things that we are talking about. Many times you're going to get into controversies, but we want to ignore those because that is not the crux of our story. But I'm just mentioning in passing just because if you hear. So there are some people who would say that Dharmaraj and Yama is not one and the same person. And there are some people who say, no, they are the same person. Doesn't matter to us that much, doesn't affect us, whatever the case. So Yudhishthir is the son of Dharmaraj. And then Kunti goes to Vayu, which is the wind, the lord of the wind, which is, there are a lot of reflections on what the wind means. It means the breathing that you do, the prana. It means what you use to focus and gather your strength together. And there is a lot of other ways in which you can look at this. But the son that she gets from Vayu is Bhim. And then from Indra, who is the king of kings, in heaven, all these king deities, these gods are there, and this Indra is the god of these gods. So Arjuna is Indra's son. And then from Madari, Pandu we saw that last time, he has two sons, the twins, Nakula and Sahadev. So the story goes that they happen to go to I'm not sure what the exact translation for Swayamvar is in English, but it's basically a event where there is a princess in a kingdom where there is some kind of contest, and whoever wins the contest, then they are basically proving that they are the most superior of all the people gathered, and then they can wed this princess. So Draupadi is the daughter of King Drupad, and they are having this contest. And Arjuna goes there, and the skilled archer and warrior that he wins that contest. And then he gets back home, and there's some weird story about this, that he comes home and he comes home to his to the mother Kunti, and he says, I've got a gift for you, I've got a present. And she says, divide it amongst your brothers. And he has to oblige. And so it happens that Draupadi is now the wife of all the 5 Pandavas. So that's what is being shown in this picture here, that we have got the 5 Pandavas. And then the Pandavas, they all of them share Draupadi. And through that, through Draupadi, each Pandava has got a son. Now, it is not unusual that one king or a person has more than one wife. As you saw that Pandu had 2 wives. So Arjuna too had a few wives. So there was Draupadi, and there was another wife that he had called Subhadra. Subhadra was Sri Krishna's sister. And through Subhadra, Arjuna has a son whose name is Abhimanyu. So let me go back to our chart real quick. So if you see here, Arjun over here, he actually, through Draupadi, he has a kid, but then through Subhadra, he has Abhimanyu. So this is another important character that we need to be aware of. And Abhimanyu then marries Uttara, and we'll see. When we come to this point, we'll see. So we are kind of gradually coming down this genealogy tree and understanding one by one all these different characters. And as you might understand, I'm really going through this super fast. This could take months and months if I go through that in a lot of detail. So let us go back to where we were. So now the story goes that the Pandavas and the Kauravas, they are kids, and then they grow up into princesses, and there is a lot of animosity between them because of the not just sharing of the land, but in general there is a lot of animosity between them. And the Kauravas, at every chance they get, they try to bring the Pandavas down in whatever way they can. So there is one such incident where they play this again. I mentioned to you that the uncle Shakuni, he works through the Kauravas, and he's trying to destabilize this whole Hastinapur. The kingdom's name is Hastinapur. So they plot this plot where they have built this home of made of all combustible things, wax and wood and dry hay and all that. And they somehow managed to get the Pandavas in that home, and they set that palace on fire. Now it so happens that Vidura, who is their uncle, is aware of this, and he has already dug a channel from under this palace, and so he saves them. Long story, but it is the reason it's called Laksagra. Again, this is one of those Sanskrit things that it is made up of two words. That is, this Laksha is basically the combustible things, and Graha means it is a home or a palace or abode. So a home made of combustible things is what it is called Laksagra. This you might see other words that you can combine with the word Graha. Graha, once you know Graha is abode, Karagraha is prison, and so on and so forth. So they are made to, they are cheated into going into this place, and it gets burned down, and Vidura saves them. And then after some time, they come back, and actually the Duryodhan is not aware, and he is actually pretty pleased at when this incident takes place. But when he sees that they are back, he's obviously disappointed. And then again, the same thing, the clash between the two continues, and they give them he kind of demands that the Pandavas, they ask that they give some land to work with, because they are also sons of Pandus. Now, one thing that actually forgot to mention is Pandu is the elder of the two brothers, between Dhritarashtra and Pandu. And Pandu happens to die. So really Dhritarashtra is kind of temporarily taking over the throne because the elder brother is absent. So really the throne belongs to Pandu's children, the Pandavas. So it's they own it. But since he has been the temporary king there, his son, the notorious Duryodhan, he is doing everything he can to ensure that the Pandavas don't take up the kingdom, and he wants to have it. So when the time comes for them to demand that they need something, they are given a place called Indraprastha. And the Pandavas take, it's a piece of barren land, there is nothing on it. And they go there and they toil, they put in a lot of effort, and they transform the whole place. And that place they call Indraprastha. So again, you will find this Sanskrit thing going on here. Indra, as you might remember, is the god from the god of the gods of the heaven, and Prastha is his residence. So it's like this is where Indra's abode is, which is basically saying that it's that good, it has got all kinds of things that you can imagine and things you cannot imagine. All kinds of wonderful things are there. It's an exquisite palace, and Duryodhana's palace is it's nothing compared to what Indraprastha is, and he happens to visit it, and there's some stories around that he slips and falls, and Draupadi laughs at him, and there's some stories around that. But the important thing is that he is dazzled, and he wants this place for himself, and he just goes nuts over this. He's like, what can we do so that we can get all this thing that the Pandavas have done. I want it. What do we do? And always the uncle Shakuni, he comes up with these devious, malicious plans. The Duryodhana, he's not as bright, I mean, in a very negative way, as the uncle Shakuni. So he cannot plot things the way Shakuni can plot, but he's quick to jump upon the suggestions that Shakuni makes. So they are brainstorming, what do we do? How do we get hold of this Indraprastha? And what they come up with is it's an interesting plan or incident. And although we don't want to spend too much time on this story, this is an important aspect or important piece in the story, in the entire story, that they have got this tradition where if you were to ask another king from another kingdom for a battle, it was your duty. You had to accept that invitation for battle, and you had to fight. You couldn't go back. That was part of your dharma, the rule that you had. And another rule that was there, which is where it gets weird, is if you are invited to a game of gambling, then too your dharma you have to follow, which is you cannot decline that invitation. You have to enter into this game. And in this game of gambling, you can you have to put whatever it is that you are capable of at stake, and depending on who wins the game, they will take it. So this is kind of a odd thing, right? I mean, one might question what is this kind of a dharma. Now, before I get into the next topic, I also want to bring up a important point here. The Vedas, and right from the beginning, they divided society into 4 parts, and it has been misconstrued how these how humans or human society is divided into these 4 parts. And we absolutely do not want to get into this debate, but I will just explain to you what these 4 parts are, because they form an important background in the story that we are going to get into. And as I mentioned, it's they are sensitive topics, and there was abuse and exploitation of how these 4 things were divided. So there is Brahmanas, Vaishya, Kshatriya, and Kshudra. There are 4. Now, even in the earliest of the Vedas, even in Purusha Sukta for that matter, there is a mention of these 4 castes. And we know now, and many people knew all through, but some people exploited and abused this fact, that this classification was based on the type of activities a person did. So if you happen to be in a medical profession, then you are a doctor. If you happen to do some engineering, then you are an engineer. If you are born to a couple who is a doctor, you don't become a doctor. If you are born who is a politician, you don't become a politician. You might grow up to become a cricketer, you might do some sport, whatever. So it wasn't by birth that these classes were assigned to people, and it just took that course. And as I mentioned, we are not going to get into that. But what was thought of then is the person who had devoted his life to intellectual pursuits was a Brahmana. The person who was working, who had devoted his life into trade and business and those kind of things, he was a Vaishya. The person who was involved in the protection of assets of the country, of his region. So he had to be good at arms. He had to be a good warrior. That was the kshatriya. And those that were doing menial tasks, he was the kshudra. So if you ended up doing very mechanical tasks, you're just tightening the wrench on an assembly, you don't think too much. That's all you do. You're just tightening the wrench. The next, you're on an assembly line in a motor car factory. The next car comes in, you tighten these 4 wrenches. You don't think about it too much. Then the next car, then you could fall into the category of kshudra. So there is this 4 things. And so the kshatriya, who is the warrior clan, they have, in each of these 4, they have their rules. They have the set rules. So you just tick, these. If you do these 6 things, you are this. If you do these 6 things, then you not only are you there, but you must follow this. So if you are a Brahmin, then you got to you would be respected for certain things, but then you're supposed to follow. It's like the rights and the responsibilities. You have got certain rights and you have got certain responsibilities. You have got to do that. So the kshatriyas, they had got this responsibility that if you were a kshatriya, you couldn't decline. If a kshatriya was invited to a battle, in those Western movies, you had got this shootout thing. If you are called, you had to go. If you are called to play this gambling, this game of dice, you couldn't deny it. That was the rule. At least that's how it's recorded in the Mahabharat. So this uncle Shakuni, he carves out this devious plan. He tells his nephew, "You want Indraprastha? I am very good at gambling." We saw that in his dice, that he had control over dice. He would be able to command the dice that this is the number that I want, and it would, when he threw the dice on the board, it would come up with that number. That was his reputation. So he virtually was not defeatable in this game. And so he says, invite Yudhishthir, which is the senior of the Pandavas, and we will make him force and play this game of dice, and we'll win over whatever he has, and you can keep asking whatever you want. So he does that. Now, it's not as simple as it looks, because when the invitation goes from this kingdom, from this darbar is kind of a royal palace, royal hall, where all these kings and the king and his ministers have gathered. From there, the well-wishers from Hastinapur, which is Bhishma and Drona and others, Vidura, of course, they can easily see through what Shakuni is trying to do. He wants to destroy the Pandavas. So they are against this, sending this request to the Pandavas, which he cannot decline, Yudhishthir, because and they know that Yudhishthir is going to lose everything. But the king, the blind king, his whole character, he loves his son like anything. It's part of his life. If something happens to him, Duryodhana, it is as good as the king is going to lose his part of himself, or maybe the whole of himself. So the Duryodhana knows this, and every time he will come up with arguments that he knows. He knows which buttons to push. And the king, he has got these great people, advisors, that are telling him, don't do this, but he is helpless before his son Duryodhana, who says, who is being fed all these dirty ideas by Shakuni, his uncle. So Duryodhana, he tells Dhritarashtra's king that send out this invitation, and he does that. And then Yudhishthira, of course, he cannot say no. And then Yudhishthira comes to play this game of dice. There are some, we cannot get into the details of what happened here at this session. This is going to take some time, so we are going to stop here in a few minutes. But before we conclude this session, there's a couple of things I want to say. That Yudhishthira is, for one, he's a kshatriya and he cannot say no. That's one thing. The other thing is he is fond of gambling. It's kind of a drawback he has. And that is one of the things in the Mahabharata, that you find that even the best of characters that are there, like Bhishma, he has got some drawbacks in it. And even the worst of characters, he has got some good points in it, which basically makes Mahabharata interesting because it reflects a lot of what average humans are. Most of us fall in this middle category. None of us are, we cannot stick to principles, and nor do we get that bad as to come to an animal level. And so between these two extremes, there are all these different play of emotions going on. So Yudhishthir, who is supposed to be like the representation of truth and values and all that in society, he has got this drawback that he appears to like gambling. And what is worse is he is not that good at it. And Shakuni is very good at it. And so the outcome of this game is pre-decided that he is going to lose. If he somehow has the guts to decline that invitation, he might be saved, he will be good. But that is his problem. As a kshatriya, he cannot decline it. And as a person, he is, I don't know if addicted is the right word to use for Yudhishthir because the kind of king that he is. But for lack of a better word, he's addicted to it. And the worst part is he's not that good at it. So I'm going to stop this recording today, and we'll look at it the next time, because this is a very important part in the entire Mahabharat, and it carves the rest of the story, why things took place the way they were. Okay, thanks for listening, and we will continue the next time. Bye.